Howdy, everybody. What's going on? I'm Marty. I'm one of your co-hosts tonight. Good to see everybody. And we got the band back together tonight. Kellen, what's been going on? How you doing?
Doing well. I was missed last week with some family in town. So we had a crazy schedule for about 5 days straight, taking care of family stuff and doing all the sightseeing and celebration for my wife, who was in her first play. So I'm super excited for her. But now that everything's cooled down, I can jump back on, and it's good to be back on a Wednesday night. It feels like I was gone for forever for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason it's like,
Well, you missed a week. You missed a week or two. What? A couple weeks ago, and between you and Jim, we've been
slackers.
Yeah,
killing for excuses. Right, here we go.
Right. What you been spinning in your off time?
Yeah. So this past week, I got in a record. I had been wanting this on vinyl for the longest time, and it was impossible to find. Found a copy recently. So this is, I think it's been shown several times by Alan on this channel, but
Yep.
Gates of Slumber, Suffer No Guilt, finally with a vinyl copy, that classic Ken Kelly artwork.
Yep.
Indiana Doom. But man, this year's been, I gotta say, we're only into March, and I might say this is a better year for me in terms of releases than 2023. But there's already a new Ulcerate record. But for those who don't know, and who are a fan of Jamie St. Morant's drum work, this band Verbaris, I mean, this is not much to look at in terms of an album cover, but I left it in the car, so it went through the paces. You can see it's all beat up there, but got lots of spins. This is an international project, but if you're a fan of Ulcerate, I definitely recommend this. We just got a promo. I want to say, at least I did this week, but they've got a new one coming out this coming weekend. So I'm really excited. This is their 2022 release. Adumbration of the Veiled Logos. And to close this out, my next review for Heavy Metallurgy will be by this band. These are the last two records. Chris's Critical Defiance, if I don't blind everyone here. I'll pull it out. But Critical Defiance, they just released this past week a new full-length.
I noticed the promo. The promo,
yeah.
And yeah.
And this is right now in terms of a young thrash band outside of potentially Norway's In Coulter. Critical Defiance is amazing. So their new record, that'll be coming here. We've got a good set of promos on their way, but yeah, look for that review. Been spinning a lot of this release as well.
All right, cool. Well, welcome back. Good to have you. And Jim, what's been going on, man?
Oh, not much. Listening to lots of Florida death metal this week for this record. I wanted to kind of cleanse the palate with different things. So this is Pelican. This is Nightmare Stories. This one came out years ago now. One of their heaviest. If you haven't heard it, this is a really good post metal record. It's I'd say the darkest one that they've done. I like all Pelican records, but I was kind of surprised at just how much they leaned in to the heavy here. So really like that record. Something great to work to as well. And yeah, I don't take my records out of sleeves. So what? BCLT, deal with it. Small Dark Funeral here. Secrets of Black Hearts, obviously classic here. Just never gets old. Just like perfect production. The songs are just flawless on this. Yeah, there's nothing you can say that hasn't already been said. This is just perfect record right here, I think. And how about a little bit of Arcanum? How about a little bit of Brand Martyr?
Great record. Yep.
Yeah.
Great project. I always liked his stuff.
Yeah. Finished Candia is another really good one. Yeah, good stuff here. Sometimes a dude's voice, I just got to be in the mood for it, he definitely kind of pushes my upper limits. But songwriting is there, and it's just kind of one of those records, even though it can be, brutal on you, for me, like, I can't just like listen to like a little bit of it. I always end up just kind of letting it go, so good stuff. So yeah, that's me this week.
Right on. What's up, TJ? How you doing?
Am I not muted?
No, you're there.
Okay. I've been playing with this mute button all night, so I gotta double check. So yeah, I'm tired and my back hurts and I've got a cold and I got mac and cheese on my shirt and did I say I was tired? Probably. So what have I? So I've been coffins, the Fleshland, and this one.
Oh yeah,
this,
good stuff.
Yeah. Beyond the circular demise, like your Japanese death metal, slow and repetitive, and just heavy as balls.
Yeah, they're good, man.
Yeah, it's so good. And then, and then I finally, I was ticked. I didn't read the description on Discogs close enough, and Swordmaster Morbid Transgoria ended up with a promo sleeve, which I already have one of these.
We got from me back in the day.
Yeah, the guy didn't put a full descriptor in the listing. Just it was like in the corner one instead of, and I didn't happen to catch it, and so I got to find me a regular release of this, but and then also listening to this is one of those built for Bandcamp deals. It's a one-man project called Cloud Kicker. It's basically, I guess, what the kids like to call gent. I don't know, but this is this is like, I'm not even sure if this is like his second record or something, but it's just really heavy and inventive and atmospheric, and no vocals. Just some of the most intense riffs and off-kilter timing. It's really cool. I enjoy the shit out of it. I played this for Marty before, but yeah, so that's my week other than Diabolic.
All right. Well, for me, I've been spinning this classic a bit. Born of the Flickering, Old Man's Child, with the promo in there as well. But Cosmic Key Creations reissued this on wax, and it's really, really nice. Super thick silver foil. The first couple of these, the second one's pretty good too. They got a little less interesting to me as they went on, but this first one is just great classic Norwegian black metal, kind of in the same vein as the first couple Dimmu Borgir albums. It's just really good, well done Norwegian black metal. Kind of got a little more technical and a little less atmospheric as they went along, but yep, when this got reissued, I had to snag the wax. I've always just had the promo of it, and might as well. I paid, I don't know, this was an expensive record when it came out, but it's done really, really well. They did a really good job with it. And on the same kind of tip, I've been trying to reconnect with this album. Again, I've been in my promo box digging around. I've seen some people in the VC here recently showing this and saying how much they love this record, and it's always kind of been the sentiment of it. I like it. I think it's unique, but I've never loved it. And I always circle back to it like, okay, I'm going to try it now. Maybe because I do like this more industrialized style of black metal, but Thorns was just kind of, I like the style of it. It's just weird. It just seemed like, had Sater singing on a lot of it. I don't know if he sings. Oh, and Alderan from Dimmu Borgir. No, Dodheim's Guard. Sorry, I've been driving all day, so my brain is like it leaked out my head somewhere around Cadillac. But anyway, it feels kind of like a undercooked Satyricon record, a little stranger. I just never fully, I like it, but I just don't see the love. But yeah, I'll get an original copy of it eventually. I just want to make sure I really need it before I buy it. But today we are talking about, the viewer's choice. And I think Simon was the one that threw this into the hat. Jim picked it for the poll. We're talking about Diabolic Supreme Evil. This is the promo that came out in 98 via Conquest Music back in the day. 4-piece Florida band. And I forgot to get the history up. Let's do that real quick. Oh boy. I'm sorry, folks. Like I said, my brain is... Oh, here we go. All right. Diabolic is an American death metal band from Tampa Bay, Florida, United States, founded in 1996 by bassist vocalist Paul Willett, drummer Aantar Lee Coates, and guitarist Brian Malone. So yeah, and I think they're still active. And they've been slogging it out since 96. Are they still active? Yep, they're still active. They just put out a brand new album this year. Blastmaster's Twisted Metal is the name of that one. But they've had a very long career. And let's get into it. Supreme Evil. Thank you, Simon, for picking this one. And we'll start with you, Kellen, since you weren't here last week. What was your initial thoughts of Diabolic Supreme Evil?
So one, death metal from 1998. I'm already interested. Like, that's my sweet spot. Give me 97 to 2003. So very much interested. But for some reason, like I this is one of those bands where I may have heard the name, but I actually never had spent time with any of their records. And so I was excited to put it on. First impression was it sounded very familiar and very much like a band that came up in Florida listening to Morbid Angel. I think that influence is impossible to avoid. There's a whole lot more going on this record, so it'd be difficult to sort of put them in a box and say it's just another Morbid Angel clone. But I think it's an interesting sort of testament to Florida death metal, a band that came along probably much later than sort of what many would consider the peak era for bands operating from that region of the country. And I think as a consequence is probably why I hadn't spent a lot of time with it. So I was pleased, man. Fast, blasphemous death metal from the late 90s. I'm in. So excited.
Right on. Jim.
Yeah, I was growing up in high school in Alabama, when Florida death metal reared its ugly head. So, I was right there when it all began, very close. I actually bought Cause of Death in Tampa. Long story there, but yeah. So obviously, all this stuff, this sound and this stuff has a very soft, has a very big place in my heart. So yeah, I like Kellen, very familiar. Lots of Morbid Angelisms on here, specifically Covenant era, which I'm super stoked about. Even a little bit of Domination here, which I love that record too. But yet, there this, again, like Kellen said, there's more going on here. There's more than meets the eye, and subsequent listens, I really kind of, started kind of picking up on how these guys differentiated themselves. And for me, it was kind of more towards the latter half of the album, which we'll get into that. There's something, supremely evil going on. With these guys. But yeah, I'm definitely interested to get a deep dive in it. But definitely first impressions, this is the kind of thing that's sort of right up my alley. So.
All right, TJ.
Yeah, this is another one of those bands that I've seen their stuff around, their name around, seen them in the mags, and just another band that I just didn't have time for in the era. I'm looking at 98. What was I listening to a lot around the time that came out, or after, and stuff like Gorguts Obscura. I remember I bought Formula's Fatal to the Flesh new when that came out. Cryptopsy's Whisper Supremacy I had a dub of that. I got a bootleg of that from you, I think, Marty. Just super sick. And then I'm thinking about what was going on in my life at the time, and I was kind of just getting back into kind of collecting again at the time, and so catching up on everything that was new and whatever. And so this is a band that I've been aware of, but just was always in the periphery of everything else. And looking up their skirt online, and because I wasn't sure about anything, it's like, oh, they're a Floridian band and stuff of that nature. And it's after the first listen, it's like, it's about what I expected, but it's better than I thought it might be. I thought it might just be, being that it was like a 98 thing, I thought, it's gonna sound like everything, whatever. And to be fair, it's like they obviously their influences are out front, but there's they've got it. There's an identity to the sound of this that's a little bit singular compared to the other bands. It's a little different. I don't know. We'll get into it more, but I was kind of surprised. It's a little better than I expected it to be, for sure.
All right. Well, I had heard this when it came out, and honestly, I have not listened to it since. I saw them once. I think they played the New England Metal and Hardcore Fest. I saw them play in a little tiny stage corner of that complex that the show was in, and they were great band, and I liked this then, but I was pretty burnt out on it. We're gonna get into that in the topic here. But listening to it today, it was like a shot, like, wow, I don't remember it being this good. And Morbid Angel, of course, comes up, but I hear Vader. Aantar Lee Coates' drum work, he reminds me of Doc from Vader a lot, and it really gives that intense edge to this music. The riffs are already super sick and have a blasphemous feel to them, and yeah, there's some Treyisms all over this thing, but it isn't enough to sink it for me. I mean, bands that rely too much on the Morbid Angel thing, it gets, Morbid Angel did it, and they did it well, and their imprint is it's undeniably their own. And when other bands do it, this doesn't feel as good or as authentic. But here, they don't go crazy with it. There's just touches of it, but they add enough other things with it to keep this. It's a short listen too. It's only like 32 minutes long, which for something like this, perfect. And that's going to lead into my. Did anybody else come up with something, or did I? You didn't see my email, okay? So this is just a thrown together at the last minute thing. So amazing the difference 2 decades makes. When this album came out, I liked it for its technical proficiency and overall approach to U.S. death metal, but I was burnt out on death metal and found renewed vigor and excitement in black metal. Looking back on what I thought in my head was a good but sounding tired stylistically for its time and genre type of album, comparing it to the current trends in the death metal scene, like, prog infused cavern dwelling, knuckle dragging death metal, Diabolic Supreme Evil feels like a lost gem that should have been uttered in the same sentence as bands like Cannibal Corpse, Vader, and Morbid Angel. And I guess my roundabout way of saying, was death metal of the 90s better? That's the question. Was it better, Kellen?
Okay.
Knowing that this is your era.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I do want to say, like, I very much appreciate the question and being first. Yeah. Because For me,
Last
though,
minute effort, my friend. Last
yes,
minute.
Going deep there, mediocrities. Going deep.
Yes. I sent out the questions.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything? Because my brain's fried. No response, everybody. This is what I'm dealing
No.
with.
We'll wing it.
Well,
I
We'll
did.
do it live.
yes. Yeah. For me, I do also want to say though, like, I think because this kind of death metal, I do want to distinguish or separate. Like, there's something that happens towards the end of the 90s where I think, like, a record that follows the year after this, I believe, is the first Hate Eternal record, which is another Floridian death metal band, right?
Mhm.
And I do think there's something to be said about, like, as much as there's an interest in newer death metal bands playing a kind of like what I think is a early 90s, late 80s death metal revival, this seems fresh. And just not because it's like necessarily new or inventive, but because there's less and less younger bands playing in this style now. They seem to be exhausted. So when you put Diabolic in the context of your favorite modern bands like Horrendous or Tomb Mold, I know how much you love them. I think it does sound like decidedly different and a different kind of 90s death metal that we don't hear younger bands attempt to recreate very often, which, and by contrast, makes it sound fresh. So I will not make the concession, however, that one era of death metal is inherently always better. I am not going to be that person. We have 3 gentlemen here who will probably disagree with that statement, but I don't like. I would kind of want to put my flag down at some point and say, like, we need to stop looking at a certain time period and seeing that as the only valid period in death metal's history. What I do agree though with the general premise of your question and the way you phrased it was, I think this time period is a underserved sort of source of inspiration for younger bands. And I think if we can go to 3rd and 4th tier bands from a prior generation, as pivotal and influential and essential as they are, I wish more bands would pick up the, Supreme Evil and listen to it as also a valid sources or a underserved or underloved record from an era that is also by extension less sort of praised. So that's my sort of long-winded answer to your question.
That was a better answer than my question was. Anyway, Jim, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely a loaded question, which, I think that no matter what you say, you're going to draw a lot of ire.
I was trying.
Obviously, all of our opinions are objective and also based on, how old were we or how far were we in our metal journey at the time? Were we just starting out? Obviously the things that kind of hang with you the most are the things that you hear the earliest usually. So yeah, it's easy for me to be the old man, get out of my yard. My era is better than you. Simply because my embracing of that music, and in my formative years, impacted me the best. For me, it's always going to be, Leprosy and spiritual healing and Altars of Madness. Those were the albums that War Master. Just all of those albums mean a lot to me. They were early in my death metal journey, but what's interesting for me is as we got towards the late 90s, I mid to late, I started listening to a lot of other kinds of music outside of metal entirely, and was kind of like always still listening to metal, but like I got more quote unquote open minded, as you would say, and listened to a lot of different things, and so I missed out on a lot of good stuff. and I had to go back later on and get it, and discovered a lot of gems that I didn't have before, and so I kind of lean more to what Kellen says, I have that attachment to early 90s death metal, but I know for a fact that all throughout the 90s the quality death metal was released, and to this day I'm still buying great death metal albums. New Spectral Voice, I just heard the new Brodequin today. I think that's an amazing record. There's a lot of great stuff out there. Oh, look at that, Kellen. Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah, that one was pretty pummeling. I'll be picking that up. So and so for me, I don't want to sideline my own experience of death metal or black metal or anything by like confining it to a certain decade, even though my old ears may feel the most attachment to something old. Like I know that metal continues to evolve and will continue to evolve after I'm gone, and continue to be heavy and amazing and creative after I'm gone. So, I will continue to fight that tendency, to say like this, that, and the other is better, even though I might definitely say that around a fire while my friends chug beers and such.
Yep. Right on. TJ.
Yeah, what happens at fat camp stays at fat camp. So that's just the way it is. that's where the truth lives.
That's
is
right.
At night by the fire, listening to Bolt Thrower, tits out. But
Yes.
But so yeah, let me refresh this here. Is older death metal better? Was that the question?
Yeah, basically.
So
taking into consideration, what's happening now and what's happening then.
Kellen and Jim both kind of touched on stuff where my sentiments are at, really, and it's a lot of things. And it's like with this band and this release, it's like at the time, they are. I mean, 98. Let's be real, there's a waning happening in that Floridian scene. We all kind of know it, all of us who've lived through it. There were still bands that were coming up at the tail end, skirting the edges of all this stuff that were still delivering the goods. This record definitely does. But how much room is there, for these top tier bands? There can only really be at any given time, there can only be, you can only have one Cannibal Corpse and one Dismember and whatever, you pick the big one and insert here, and then everything else just kind of lives in its periphery or in its wake. And I mean, it's just kind of the nature of things. Not every band can be that big, that successful. And you can blame that on any number of things, whether it's corporate malfeasance and manipulation or whatever, and so this band, coming in and 98 like they did, they're delivering. We'll get into the whys and wherefores and warts of this record as we go, but for me, it's always going to be, nostalgia will always trump the newer things, even though I perpetually am always looking for new stuff. I'm always on the hunt, zipping through Spotify or Bandcamp or YouTube, and I'm always looking for fresh things, or in the distros looking for stuff I haven't. But then no matter what happens, I always default to the classics. I always go back and I want to hear the stuff that still gets me in the feels, the stuff that still draws me in. But then, like Jim says, I got older, my ears open, my opinions changed, and stuff that I would have never gave the time of day when I was a kid, 17, 18, 19 years old. Today, stuff I love, and that, not even death metal or whatever. I mean, I don't like a band like Pelican. I think Pelican's great, for instance. Jim brings that. I like that band a lot, and I dig that stuff a lot, but I don't know if I would have cared about that when I was 16 at all. You know, it's like, what is this crap? But again, they're an evolved band farther, you know, it's like, was it stuff like that even really happening then either? So, you know, that kind of whatever burns itself out on that. But I don't know. Is it better? I don't know if it's better, but it's certainly, you know, it was an era where things were evolving and all the new bands and all the fresh bands were coming up and all the legacy bands were, you know, the early 90s and whatever. And, you know, we were all into it so much. And then things started to evolve again. You know, here we are, you know, years and years later. I mean, we're only, this is, you know, this record was 98. So, you know, we're only just a few years away from 30 years on this or 20, or whatever.
26
you know?
years, I think. 26
yeah, you know, so I mean, it's only just 5 minutes away, and look at how much stuff has changed. And like Kellen says, the kids coming up, it's like they're finding this stuff, but they're not bringing all of it like this up to now. Some of it, yes, but then they have their own thing, and then the stuff that gets popular, you know, like the cavernous stuff, and all of a sudden that's a thing, you know, this kind of, you know, dumbed down, quasi guttural, you know, swamp metal stuff. And, you know, that's death metal now or whatever. And it gets big, and, you know, sang with Suxabung and all those bands or whatever, you know, it's like, okay, cool, man. You know, I don't get it. I don't understand the appeal myself, but I understand why people get into it. So, but again, they're not bringing a lot of that 90s stuff. It's just not the same. There, you can pull it out of there. You can pick it out in some of these fresh bands, but it's still different. You know, it's coming through a different filter. So I will always say that the 90s stuff and the formative eras and stuff will always, I think, will be sacrosanct and will always rule. But we're always going to want to have room for something fresh and exciting, and, you know, something that can, you know, always want to rediscover that moment when the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you're just like, my God, I got to listen to this. There is no other band that matters but this band, you know. There you go.
200 dad wounds. That's good.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
Nailed it. So anyway, that's my take on it. There you go.
Yeah, I was trying to, you know, be a jerk with that comment, but really, I look back on the 90s, the mid to late 90s. There were two forms of death metal that were really taking flight during this time. The stuff that Diabolic was playing, and I put that in, lumped in with like Vader, you know, really fast and clean and kind of evil sounding. And then there was another style coming in, the Brazilian style, the Christians of the world. Christian, what was it name? Abhorrence? Was that the name of the band?
Yep.
Bands like that. There was this really primitive, really fast, just kind of like bloody knuckles, you know, bare fist fighting type of death metal. And, you know, I liked it. I liked both styles. I loved Vader quite a bit, and I appreciated Christian. Saw him a bunch during that era. And it just, at the time, it just kind of reached a climax for me. I was tired of it. I was burnt out on it. Everything had started to feel like it had reached its creative zenith. Like the drummers couldn't get any faster. They had progressed, you know, technical proficiency had gotten, you know, the early days of death metal where, you know, dudes were just playing fast thrash beats as fast as they could. And that was death metal back then. And all of a sudden the blast beat was perfected, and, you know, the single foot blast to the double foot blast and the you know, the hyper blast and all this other crap. It changed, and it was amazing. I loved it, but I found myself really enjoying the dissonant melody in black metal, the atmosphere. Black metal brought atmosphere where there was none. So I spent a good bunch of years toiling away in that whole scene for sure. But I kind of look at, my question was kind of hinting at today. You know, I poke fun at the cavernous bands. I like it. I think it's cool. But the cavernous bands right now feel to me very similar to what the black metal bands all trying to rip off Dark Throne. That's what it feels like right now. All these cavernous bands are trying to sound like Incantation, or a stripped down derivative of Incantation. They all just kind of have the same voice, and it's starting to breed a level of stagnates. And even though it's good, and it's also starting to center on a Bandcamp / tape culture. Have you noticed? A lot of these cavernous bands come out on tape and Bandcamp before anything really happens. But I think the next step is indeed the prog thing, which I also poke fun at. I think the technical proficiency, again, we're seeing another jump in creativity. I don't know that I like where it's going, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. And it boils down to, I think TJ nailed it on the head with the nostalgia thing. It's always the 80s and the 90s death metal is always going to be better to me because that's where I came from. And I find a level of comfort in that era. The new stuff now, from an old guy trying to stay with the times, and it's like been there, done that, and it's been done better, or it's been done the same. I mean, there's too many merch core band. That's a good merch core. That's great, Chris. That's actually cool. That's a cool term, merch core. Yeah, I think we're at another zenith, I think, but the bright side of death metal, bands like Horrendous, bands like Tomb Mold, they are trying to move the ball down the field. They're trying to do something different, and I applaud them for that. And I might warm up to it. I don't hate it. I just don't. It just feels too highfalutin for me. So it's like the Goldilocks thing. It isn't good enough, or it's too experimental. It isn't just right, and that's where I'm at with it right now. Is 90s death metal better? It is. It is what it is. Is it better to me? I mean, maybe, but again, that's from a nostalgic perspective. But it's still killer. I still love death metal. It's awesome, but there's too many bands. Let's discuss the musicality and composition of Supreme Evil. Jim.
There's no doubt these guys can play. I especially love the drummer. He's got like this really kind of like, frantic sort of style that, he doesn't play as like, as expectantly at, in the pocket as a lot of like Florida bands that came out 8 years earlier would have. He's kind of more all over the place with the way that his snare work is, with the way, he's on his ride and his primary cymbals. If you listen to him, he's just a little bit crazier. Like, it's still controlled, and he definitely like reins it back in when they're playing those slower tempos, like when they're doing more of the palm mute stuff, the down pick stuff. Then it kind of just like that sort of freneticism is kind of pulled back a little bit into more of a kind of a standard style, but just overall in general, I definitely think that that guy had something special going on, and also there's some really surprising lead work here. That Tim made the comment earlier that he thought he heard a lot of Kerry King. Now there is a lot of dive bomb, whammy bar love here, but again, Florida death metal, that's kind of a pretty common, but if you kind of look deeper than that, especially on the latter half of the album, there's some really, really thought out, melodic lines in the solos, and but there's two guitar players that are switching off that, frankly, Kerry could never pull off. Maybe in the early 80s when he was still trying to play better, but when he finally just aligned himself with just like making noise, but I definitely think there's some playing on here that he couldn't pull off, and certainly some phrasing that is beyond his ability. I'd actually call out specifically In View with Abhorrence. There is some runs in that song, and definitely sort of like the key that he stays in when he's doing some scales and stuff that definitely reminded me of James Murphy. Not as shred-tastic awesome as James Murphy. If you can do that as well, check out Disincarnate if you don't believe me. But that feeling was there. And so you can tell that these guys, didn't just do their homework on, their hometown gods from a decade earlier or 8 years earlier in terms of like riffing, but also kind of, took a step of influence, with the lead playing, which for some of the shredders of that era, that earlier area, you know, that's no small feat. There were some incredibly talented people, you know, in that scene. You know, but you know, so we've talked about drums, we've talked about solos, but you know, there's definitely musicality in the compositions as well. Like even though I personally heard a lot of like Covenant era Morbid Angel, a little bit of Domination era Morbid Angel. You know, once you get to the latter half of the song, there's some really like darker style, open chord, almost black metal type riffs going on there in the last few songs. I don't want to call them out now. We'll get more of that later.
My favorite song on the album has that all over it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when, you know, the album really starts living up to its name as Supreme Evil. Like I really started getting those evil vibes there. Well, you know, we might as well, let's just call it out. Like on Dwelling Spirits, they're very dark and you know, melodic sounding, you know, riffs and solos kind of combined together. There's screaming harmonics at the outset, but when you listen to Wicked Inclination, man, that's just a straight up black metal riff. You know, that song's a straight black metal riff. And then what's really cool about it is they didn't just stop there. Over the bridge of that, there's a really creepy melody line that the guitar plays, one of the lead guitar plays. It's not fast, it's not shreddy, it just sounds evil, it just sounds dark. And you know, with that whole black metal feel of the song, like, you know, that was like, a real highlight for me, you know, where I really felt like the band, you know, lived up to their name. Like, this is Diabolic, like these guys pulled that off. And so, you know, when you can kind of, you know, you're expected to be able to create that vibe as a straight black metal band, but when you're a death metal band and you can create that feeling of unease, you know, and like you're stepping into a dark cave, not to be, you know, a guttural, you know, incantation clone, but to be, you know, someone, you know, when your torch just burned out. That's that's an accomplishment as a death metal band. You know, you're crossing a line into a different realm while staying true to your genre. So yeah, I think these guys really had something going on really well, especially latter half of the album. And just like you said, you know, when I got to that song, I was like, yeah, to your point, Marty, this is a hidden gem.
All right. Kellen.
Alan's
on fire tonight.
I need to calm down.
Simmer down now,
yes.
Professor. Get grading papers or something.
I'm talking about the song here. Okay. All right. Songwriting, composition. I would agree with like the era of Morbid Angel that you're talking about. It's somewhere between like after Blessed and before Gateways. Like this record sort of lives in that spot for me. And I think what I actually came away with, like overall as a summation for the songwriting, this is their debut full length, and it seems incredibly well balanced as a songwriting venture. They know how to do this. They know how to do the slow stuff. They know how to do the mid-pace stuff. The songs have structure and direction and meaning. Like where it fails is it isn't as inventive as I want it to be. I think relative to some of their sort of like peers that are operating this style, I think either there were bands who were doing it more extreme than they were. Like you mentioned, you know, a band like Abhorrence or Rebellion from Brazil come to mind. It's like bands that are just at a much faster pace. And then if you wanted to do something more blasphemous and atmospheric, you know, a band that I also think deserves, you know, conversation here is a band like Vital Remains. I think they did
good
bringing
call.
in black metal to a death metal aesthetic with this era and incorporating, like, you know, this to me, they seem like they grew up on Deicide and Morbid Angel. That's what this record sounds like. You have a bunch of people who love those early Deicide and Morbid Angel records.
Legion era, more specifically, the faster side of Deicide.
And I very much agree with the production side of the drum work we'll get to later, but like Steve Asheim for me is a perfect example of an incredibly succinct and tight drummer. This drummer, he doesn't sound like that at all. There's a little bit more sort of liberty that he's playing with, which I think works well in an era in which death metal drumming, you know, you look at like John Longstrength, for example, like early Angel Corpse stuff.
Corpse, yeah.
Yeah. The drumming was becoming more technical, tighter, faster, more aggressive. Like, it's interesting to hear him play with a bit more openness and space and less concerned with that. So I don't really need to sort of carry on here about the songwriting. I do think, though, just the overall point is how well balanced this is. The lead work, I agree, is you get like that crazy Trey solo stuff, but there's also moments on these songs where they're much more composed. It's just not sort of that crazy kind of solo stuff. And there's also on the back end of the record, I guess my last thought here is like there's some interesting sort of intros to these songs.
They're very cool.
Interesting little atmospheric elements that they sort of toy with. And I think they may have been hesitant to explore further given it's their first release. But for a first record, there's a lot of maturity on display in terms of the songwriting.
Right on. TJ.
So I don't know where to start with all this. So this is probably this is probably where I had the most critical kind of take on anything that was going on, because to be right off the top, I like this record and I think it's really cool, and I think it is a hidden gem. I think it looks like they got out on the road and they had a lot of attention, but it's unfortunate that this couldn't have propelled them a little bit further. I do see in the comments
they're 8 years too late.
Yeah, that somebody had mentioned that this record, the rest of their stuff doesn't quite hold up to this record. I have not gone and checked out any of the other stuff yet, so I don't know, but that might be fair. But I noticed with this is like, I think these songs, this band is very intense, definitely talented. They obviously rehearsed their asses off to deliver this performance in the studio. But there are moments when this band, there are moments in some of these songs where it sounds like it feels like they're reaching a little bit outside of their skill set. There are some timing issues. If you listen to was it that where that break where the kicks break out by themselves in Sacrament of Fiends, he is those kick drums are so off, it's ridiculous, but the delivery is so intense, and then the song kicks in and it's just like you forget about it. I'm sitting here peeling it apart to be critical, and it just jumped out at me. But then the song comes in, it's just like, God, this is really good. This is just rips ass, and then there's a moment like was it Rack of Torment? The song starts out and then they drop the solo in a really weird, it's like it just feels like it's out of sync with the rest of the song. And it's just little things like that. Is it intentional? I don't know. Whatever. I mean, I'm just the stuff that jumped out at me. And then I feel there's kind of, as much as I like the record, it's a little one-dimensional. It's like the songs all kind of follow the same pacing, more or less, until you get towards the end of the record where that black metal riff jumps out at you, and you're just like, okay, this is cool, but does this belong on here? I mean, I don't know. It was just, it threw me a little bit, but I like the song, but it just seems like they're really following kind of one kind of precept about what they're trying to deliver, and it's basically just endless punishment and power, and they deliver on all fronts. I mean, I'm not trying to rip this band down per se or anything. It's just I just kind of picked that out. It's just the to me there, and Kellen did touch on this. It's like the creativity. There are places where it would have been cool if they had driven down a little harder into some of the the crunchier parts or the moodier parts and things like that, but they always kind of come right back, and they're just and the drummer, I mean, Yeah, I mean, a lot of drummers struggle with those hyper, 250 BPM kicks, and now you have this whole dichotomy of, well, I'm going to go in and the producer's just going to fix it, and then the producers are all like, I read the articles, they're like, yeah, these bands come in here and these drummers can't even play this shit, and I spend half my time, quantizing kick drums, and it's everybody knows, they do it, and it's just like, what, so it's like in this here you have a raw performance, this drummer, and you hear it, and it's just like, and he's just he's just hauling balls trying to play this part, and it's just like, ugh. But it's still cool, I hear it, but I'm just like, this, it's cool, and then the whole song kicks in, and it's just like pummeling you over the head, and so, and the drum performance is just great. It's so violent and so vicious, and it's just tight. As far as the snare work and everything else goes, but it's just I'm picking out those kicks, and it's like they're there because whoever mixed this record did a pretty good job. We'll get to that obviously, but and so it's like it all kind of stands out. But for all my criticisms of it, I still think what they delivered as a debut is just extraordinary. It's such a powerful record. It just stomps on you, and even though the songs, in my opinion, are a little kind of, down the middle of the road, they're still all really good. And there are moments, they drop in and out, and, and like I say, that track 9, whatever, they are trying some stuff, but I think ultimately they deliver, a solid performance and composition and talent on this record that's just, without question, is excellent. So there.
Right. First of all, considering the musicality and composition, the fact that this is only like 32 minutes, it's a good sweet spot. I really like albums that live in this area. Just under 40 minutes to me is get in, get out, say what you're going to say it well. And, I agree with everything that was said here, but I will say that the songs don't feel that formula dominant to me. I really like the night. They seem to switch between the slower to the faster parts flawlessly. I like the dynamics within the songs. Maybe they use the formula for every song, but, going on Aantar's drum performance, I mentioned Doc from Vader. I kind of compare Aantar to Doc, although Doc is a little bit more precise. Doc had the speed and the precision. I think Aantar, he's got the speed. He's got more of a intensity to his playing. And I think his fills are a little bit more exciting than Doc's as well. So, and with the drummer playing in this intense frame of speed, this intense BPM all the time, or he could play it quite frequently, it really gives these songs a lot of excitement for me. And the riffs, the Morbid Angelisms are there, but they don't always live in that space, which is great. It doesn't define them, which I think is very cool. I like the vocals. I mean, I think the songs are just very well constructed, and nothing jumped out here. Like I said, I put this on and I'm like, is this the same record that's been sitting in my promo box unlistened to for 26 years? It is. And I went and I started digging. I had 2 CDs in the distro that haven't sold. I took the shrink wrap off them tonight. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to be listening to these. And this was actually sitting on my shelf, which I got it as an Olympic Century Media promo back in the day. So I got some catching up to do. I don't have all of them, but this album, like I said, it really fits in the Angel Corpse, Vader, Morbid Angel realm, and I really like the hot eras of all those bands. So I've got no complaints, really. I think the songwriting is pretty scathing and ferocious and exciting. And this album was recorded at Audiolab Studios and mastered at Morrisound Studios. But let's discuss the production. Jim, we'll start with you.
I for the most part, I really like the production. I like I think the super thickness of the guitars, which for me are like the loudest thing going on here. I think it works for this style, of Florida death metal. My only gripe with it is It really swallows the bass performance up. Like it, it's that kind of like super thick guitar, scooped EQ. Like I can hear the distortion on the bass, but I can't hear the notes of the bass. Like that's all I can hear. It's like I hear like that, which is great. I mean, anybody who watches the show knows I love distorted bass, but I can't hear what the bass player is doing. Like that's all I hear is the actual distortion. So I do think that was sort of a missed opportunity. I think they could have maybe removed some of the low end there out of the guitar and then pushed the low end of the bass up there so we can actually hear the notes and not just the distortion of it. The drums do have this definitely sounds like a super raw overall recording, which is not a dig for me. I like raw recordings, but I think overall the drums had a little bit of a strange sound on the kicks. I wasn't really kind of too sure what was going on there, but it's sort of, I don't really hate that though. I think it kind of added to the charms for the overall just sort of weirdness of the record. The vocals themselves, I think, were kind of perfectly placed. I like how the guy kind of pushes back and forth from like low to more of a higher thing. Almost, there's even a song where when they slowed down to like this doomier type riff, it reminded me of a Fix from a riff perspective and from a vocal perspective. So I think all that was like really cool. But yeah, I think really it's fine. I just wish that the bass had gotten some more attention, because I think there was definitely plenty of space, in the sound spectrum for them to have allowed that. And they decided instead to just kind of give all of that bottom end to the guitar, and it sort of, just really, swallowed it up entirely. But other than that, though, like I like the almost like 8-track quality, and I mean 8-track in terms of like how many tracks they recorded of the sound here. I think it kind of gives it a little bit of a charm. I think there's a lot of things that were coming out in '98 that were much more cleanly produced around this time. And though this band was completely not on my radar, I had not heard of them until Simon, mentioned them, for the voting stuff. I think if I had, I would have been surprised in a good way to hear these guys, whether or not it was based on, their, how much they had to spend in the studio, or if it was like an intentional sort of like, let's go in there, and make this sort of like, like a really well produced demo in terms of its attack. Whatever the reasons, I overall I like the production. I just wish that the bass had got a little more love.
All right, Kellen.
I really don't have too much to disagree with in terms of the bass interpretation here. I very much thought it got swallowed up in the guitar tone. What was interesting though is this style of death metal for me also sounds tonally very dry, and that didn't sort of venture into the drum production, like where it by extension is as dry as the guitar tone can sometimes sound. It often turns the drums into something that's kind of thin, and I think for all the failings in terms of a perfect execution of the performance of the drum work here, I felt it was a welcome sort of sound that could have existed at a much earlier time period in death metal's history. Like this record sounded like death metal people who wanted it to sound like it at some level it came out in 1993 or something like that. So given, to Jim's point, was happening in '98, I think it sounds like a welcome sort of choice. I'm not sure here. Are there two vocalists performing on? I think on the record we have two different vocalists that are listed, right?
Let me look here on the archives. Yeah, the bass player does vocals backing, and Paul plays guitars and sings.
So I think there's, to your point, like the whatever trade-off is happening potentially between low and high or so on and so forth. It sounds great, like where they're placed in the mix. When they need to be dramatic, they're coherent. Solos aren't consumed in a guitar tone that has plenty of bottom end to it. Outside of like the bass not being able to pierce through in a way that you would hear like technically what is being performed, I really don't have too many issues with the production on this.
All right, TJ.
There we are. Yeah, overall, I like the production on this. There are a few things. I would, when you get into the rhythms and the hyper speed parts, the guitar tends to it turns into a wash a little bit, and a little more clarity would have been cool. But there is a life and a breath in this production that's really cool. That's kind of like the guys are saying, kind of indicative of a more raw earlier time. It's kind of hard to dismiss, because I think as much as I like stuff that is well produced and things like that, there are moments when you want certain things to have that kind of feel and stuff like this, especially, and so it definitely does. But they're just, I want those rhythms to shine brighter in there, and they get into where the drums are, because the drums are big on this, and powerful, and so the rhythm parts tend to get kind of just consumed in everything, and then again the bass is just, there's bass in the mix, but it's just not a part of the the tonal stuff that stands out, which would have been cool, to hear, unless he's not really doing anything, then well, whatever, some bass players do, some don't. So, but by and large, the production on this is pretty cool. I think it's kind of appropriate and just, sits right. It just would have, a little more clarity in spots for the guitars, but the mixing and the tone and everything, I think is just kind of perfect for what it is.
And I agree with that. I like the fact that it's got, the production has a life to it. It doesn't sound completely sterile. They didn't mix or record or phase out all of the energy on here. And something happened in the mid 90s, and it kind of started with Scott Burns, to be honest with you, when Scott Burns and the Morrises at Morris Sound were very much into pioneering the whole drum trigger thing. Love them or hate them, it changed it changed the way drummers are perceived, I think, in metal in general. They're always the timekeepers, but when all of a sudden there's an element of clarity to the kit, it made the drums kind of a lead instrument, which it was always a timekeeper. Now all of a sudden there's a clarity there. I'm not saying that these drums sound incredibly triggered, but you can hear the drums and they're mixed up loud. You got a good, exciting drummer, mix him so you can be heard. It's like a lead instrument. And the sacrifice for this element is, of course, the bass is gone. It's just gone. One thing they could have done to combat that is to turn off the distortion on the bass. If he was doing something, have a cleaner bass tone, it would have cut through the guitars and had a life sitting alongside the drums. I didn't even, it's funny, Jim mentioned, Jim always mentions the bass. And as soon as he said it, I started thinking back on listening to this album this week. I didn't even think about the bass because I didn't hear it. It wasn't out of sight, out of mind type of thing. And it is a thing. Other than that, I like where the guitars sit. I like where the vocals sit. It's mixed really well. I think it's a good sounding record. It doesn't sound lifeless. It's got a lot of energy. It's got a bit of a live buzz to it, which I dig. So yeah, totally cool. Least favorite songs. TJ, we'll start with you. You're muted.
You're welcome. Yeah, so
the best you ever sounded, everybody. Wow.
I know it.
You're muted too, Jim.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're getting awful cocky up there with your mute on there, Silver Fox.
Oh man.
That's what I get. That's what I get.
Yeah. So I after the intro, Saccharine of Fiends, I think, is a really cool opening track. I think it delivers the goods on what, overall what they're going to give you. It kind of goes, all through what they do and throughout the rest of the record. I love track 5, Grave Warnings. It's a very savage track. It almost disassembles in spots. It's just kind of so relentless. And then, I mean, the rest of the record is really, and then again, track 9 for my least, it's like, and that's not even really, it's like what, the song starts and like, this is weird. This is a weird riff. And there's a few weird riffs on it, but this one's like, this is like black metal stuff. And then they jump out of it into something that's more straight ahead from everything you've already been hearing for the rest of the record. And it's well executed, but it just, to me, it felt out of place. So I dinged it for that, but otherwise, I mean, I like the record, pretty much overall. There's really nothing else in here. I mean, my other criticisms of just, there was a predictability to the way the songs ran and stuff, but it wasn't bad. It's once they tell you what they're going to do, they do it from start to finish, and there's nothing bad about it at all. So, but yeah.
All right, Kellen.
Yeah, I will kind of echo TJ's points here. I think there's no real like failure on this. There's no terrible cover of a whatever Beatles song or track number 12 or anything like
Rigby.
That. Yeah.
Thanks.
The demonic yellow submarine or something like that. Like, yeah, there's nothing like that on this record that's egregious. But I think it suffers from at some level like a little bit of predictability. And as varied as the songs are in terms of like pacing, they still operate within a certain limitation that I think, while maybe for death metal fans is okay, I ended up wanting more from this record to kind of cleared parts that separated it. Now, I actually think that the song that we're all talking about here that we've referenced several times in Wicked Inclination, man, like that really caught me off guard and kind of woke me up when I would listen to this.
The album
record.
needed it at that point, I think.
Yeah, it's what's interesting is like I don't know if I would have given the record more sort of runway if it had come along earlier. Like if that was earlier in the track listing, I may have like thought, where's I'm more entertained, maybe I'll get that more on the back end. But I actually like Rack of Torment a lot. That's another one. But most of the favorites for me come towards the back end of the latter half of the record. I think the first 5 tracks or so really established like what we're all about as a band. And then for some reason, I think they take greater chances in terms of atmospheric components or different kind of riffing style. Things that by 1998, I wanted from a blasphemous death metal record. There's no real bad songs here. And for anyone who loves aggressive, blistering, peeling the paint off the wall death metal, like you'll be pleased with this. But those are probably my two tracks, the Rack of Torment and Wicked Inclination, that are my favorites.
Right on. Jim.
Yeah, definitely for me, I think I mentioned earlier, it's the latter half of the album that I really, really like. Rack of Torment, track 6 kind of starts it off, but I think it really picks up for me at View with Abhorrence. The beginning riff is kind of played higher up on the neck. All the other songs are played low down, as low as they could for that sort of Covenant sludge sort of sound. Great solo in that song. Then about a minute and a half in, there's like a black metal riff that is not played too long, but it's in there, and that sort of kind of clues you into like what's going to be popping up a couple songs later. Dwelling Spirits I already talked about, but yeah, Wicked Inclination, man, I just really, really love that song. The combination of like the black metal riffs on the verse and just, in that, death metal format really, really, caught my attention and, kind of left me wanting more. Like I kind of wanted more of that, like early in the album, though, I know, the Morbid Angelisms on the first half of the record, all that stuff's dear to my heart. There's even some like obituary calls, that call outs with Sacrament of Fiends, the way the vocals kind of fade in, like almost backwards and forwards. That reminds me of Words of Evil off Slowly We Rot, by Obituary. Just so there's, grave warnings, the pace of that riff, the way that it's designed, it reminds me of Where the Slime Lives. But then it's like the latter half of the album, like, they're really kind of pulling more influences in here from like more of a black and death metal sort of world. And again, as I mentioned before, like I really felt that the latter half of the album is when, they kind of, kind of stepped it up and are living up to their name and their title. Even the title track, the last song, a great bruiser of a track to fade out on.
Yep.
It's fast, pounding. I like the cool, like octave based riff that's going on in the verses. That kind of bridge and chorus piece. That's where I heard a little bit of his fix there. And then there's that slow doomy riff that carries it out. That kind of reminds me of a little bit of early Incantation. So yeah, I mean, I really think that the darkness came on the latter half of the record for me. So there is no least favorite track for me. I all of them were pretty great. Even to TJ's point earlier, like a little bit of like just rawness in the drums. Like Rack of Torment has like these kind of cymbal breaks are like burr, 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 burr. Yeah. Like when I first heard it, it's like he does it like about 3 times in the song. Wasn't too sure about that, but then I really just like felt like the song wouldn't have been the same without him after multiple listens, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I think it's super consistent all the way through, but definitely on the latter half of the album is when they came into their own, and kind of wish they had permeated throughout would be my one little nitpick there. So.
All right. Well, for me, my favorite track is Wicked Inclination. I think even though this is a short record, by the time Wicked Inclination comes, that change in style, that it's like it went to a more intense track, black metal themed riff. It's distantly melodic and oddly triumphant sounding, and they live in that riff for a while. They don't just play it once or twice. It's kind of a focal point of the song, even though it's the second shortest song on the album. But by that time, exactly, it's a wake up, like, oh, I've enjoyed the dynamics leading up to that point, but here's something a bit different. I think it was a good placement just before the ending of the record. It was a good spot for that song. The second, and I will also say I do like the sound treatments on here, the intro, the outro, and sprinkled in. There's like some electronic synth stuff going on there. It's just a really warm tone. It's a nice touch on this record. If they would have farted with it, maybe working it into some of the songs, it would have really brought the blasphemous side out a little bit more, I think. But can't remember the name of the song. It was Sacrament of Fiends. Great start off track, kind of sizes up what's happening. But I think, you get about Grave Warnings and on, the album gets a little bit more exciting structurally for me. And they start taking a little bit more chances. Again, with the black metal riff that they live in for a while on Wicked Inclination. I will say this isn't a ding on the record, but Dwelling Spirits, the song just before Wicked Inclination, it exerts the most obvious Morbid Angel influence. They're Brian and Paul, the guitar players, are both channeling Trey a little bit more effectively than they have on the rest of the album. It's a lot more noticeable. So it's pretty much a Morbid Angel derived riffs going on there. Again, it doesn't detract from the album, but it's just kind of like, come on, do you need to do this? I mean, when you play a riff like that, you know what it is. You're like, oh, it's not like we're trying to work with we're playing a Morbid Angel riff. stuff like that, it's like a little bit too on the nose for me. But it's still a good song. Really, I have no real, other than that, any major complaints. And the title track, the album closer, again, Jim nailed it. There's a bruiser way to go out. It starts out fast, kind of goes a little more mid-pace. It's just always kind of unrelenting, and then they end on the outro, the synth stuff. So they get in, they get out, they create a solid record. So that leads us to Judgment. Final thoughts, Kellen.
Yeah, if I saw it out in the wild, I would pick it up for sure. No, my criticism would be that there's probably, if you have to choose between this and an Angel Corpse record, it's not like, there's a couple of other bands that I would say I would point you towards first. But besides that, yeah, like this, I like this record, and I have a certain kind of attraction to this style of death metal. So for people who are just kind of playing around in it, it wouldn't be the first band I recommend. But if this is your thing, like I'm not well versed. Maybe after Marty listens to all the Diabolic CDs in his collection there, he'll let me know if this is the best one he's got. But
right. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a lot of destruction homework to do in the next 2 days. A lot. Not
okay,
good.
well,
Yeah. Won't be this week.
But if I saw it out in the wild, for sure I'd pick it up. Right
on, Jim.
Yeah, I echo Kellen's sentiments. I pick it up out in the wild. I don't know that I'd say it's essential. It's more like a B- for me, because like it's really that latter half of the album is super strong, and I just kind of wish they had leaned more into that more sort of experimental blackened type sound, which I think that is their sweet spot. I think that's when they are their most creative, and like Kellen, that's when I like really stood up and took notice on from track 6 onward. But that said, I'd still pick this up, because what I noticed was the more I listened to it, and I did listen to it several times, but I kept finding cool little things in there, and that's what every good record does, is even something as like raw and very obvious with its influences, this, like, there's still these like little twists and turns here, that very subtly kind of point to their own takes on their influences, their own little stitchings of their own character, in the riffs and in the structural build outs of the song. So, it would be fun to take the dive even further, with it in my collection. So yeah, I'd say a strong B-, definitely worth picking up.
TJ.
Yeah, I don't know. The record gets like a 7. It's a good record. I don't, I would pick this up used probably. And like Kellen says, there are probably other bands that I would point at first. But I would definitely, somebody were to come at me, I'd be like, oh yeah, again, my criticisms aside, they deliver. It's a punishing record. It's really cool. I definitely recommend it. But yeah, 7 3/4, something like that. It's a killer record.
Yeah, it's a ripper. I was, again, pleasantly surprised putting this on, and like, wow, I don't remember it being this good. I don't. And it is. It's good. The best from the era? No, probably not. But again, I was just looking at my promo at some point throughout the years. The CDs broke. See the little spider web there? Yeah. So I'm going to have to, if I want to listen to this other than on YouTube Music, I'm going to have to find a copy somewhere. But yeah, I think it's a solid 7.5 to 8. I would probably lean a little bit more on the 8 side. It's been kind of refreshing to listen to something this energetic and purely death metal, considering all the other stuff I've been listening to lately. It was a nice change of pace. It was a good refresher, a good refreshing break from my normal diet of extreme metal for sure. So yeah, thanks. We're going to be doing this viewer's choice thing. I think you guys are going to get into the rotation. Me and TJ were talking about this. After we each go through, I think the crowd gets the 5th pick. Does that sound good in our rotation? Do we all sound like that's in a good agreement?
Yes, yes.
Cool.
Let the people be.
Let the people speak.
Picker.
Yep. But yeah. And next week, TJ is on target for picking something for us. You're muted.
Anyway.
Kiss my ass. I saw that. I can read that.
Yeah, so let's I don't know, I'm conflicted about what I want to do here. Let's give me just 1 second. Hell with it. All right, we're gonna go Crescent Shield.
You've been talking about this.
Yeah, Last of My Kind. I ordered their other one the other day, and now that I think about it, it hasn't shown up yet. So great, I'm gonna have to.
Okay.
Crescent Shield, Last of My Kind. The Last of My Kind.
So what's the genre here, TJ? I don't know these guys.
Metal, trad metal, heavy metal.
Okay.
Kind of epic metal, isn't it?
I don't know if we'll go that far. I wouldn't call it epic. Just it's more like, I mean, like Slowfag comes to mind a little, in that vein, clean vocals, metal riffs, that kind of stuff, very traditional. You think so? Maybe. I don't know.
I got that impression when you were playing it in the car the one night we were out and about. I kind of got that impression a little bit. I mean, it's not like Manila Road or Dark Quarter, but
Looks like it has members of Destiny's End, which
is
American.
Yes.
Yep. Well, cool. Crescent Shield, The Last of My Kind, and show notes will be Jürgen from Germany, 6 Beers, 9 Wives, will be joining us. We're doing a deep dive and ranking of the Destruction catalog. So I have a lot of Destruction to listen to this week, and I have not done any of it yet. So good thing
easy Release from Agony, number 1.
I don't know if that'll be my number 1, but it's up there. It's up there for sure.
It just should be.
Right. Enjoying it quite a bit. Good pick. Crescent Shield's second album. Right on. But yeah, anybody have anything to add before we jump? Kellen, you got anything coming up?
I do not. I've got a review. Hopefully here, I'll get that taken care of this weekend, and that'll be the next video I shoot. So look for the new Critical Defiance review coming on Heavy Metallurgy.
Yeah, I'm going to be reviewing the new Fenris album. What the hell's the name of that band? I don't remember. I got to do it this weekend. Anyway, yeah, that's going to be, I'm sure I'll have fun things to say about that. Jim, what's going on with you? Anything good?
Not much, man, except that I get to sit right next to you during Wednesday night album club in July.
That's right. Maybe we could conjure a fact. Oh, a Coffin Storm. That's it. Thanks, Maya. Yep, I'll be reviewing the Coffin Storm. I'm hoping to get it up Monday. I'd like to get up by Friday, but it's no way, not happening. I haven't even listened to it yet. So, yep. Anyway, TJ, anything going on up on your end or no?
Oh yeah, I'm just going to be spending the next few days learning how to read these listings on Discogs, because it turns out I ordered two promos. Yeah.
I can tell you the band stuff that we submit back and forth, half the time you don't read those either. You're like asking questions on stuff I already said in the thing. I'm like, this guy can't read. I got to start sending pictures.
Yeah. So,
he can read. He just doesn't care.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, I treat everything like the emails I get, just like this, skip that part. I don't, just looking for the lowlights, I don't. Yeah. Anyway, that's great. Good times for me. Nothing. I got nothing going on. I never have anything going on. I got nothing. I have nothing. I do nothing. I am nothing.
Right on. Well, anyway, thanks everybody. Y'all rule. It was good to have everybody in the chat again and some new faces as well. So cheers. We'll see you Friday night, and we'll see this group of characters next Wednesday for sure. So cheers, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you later.